Marvel has been operating as a large part of the cultural zeitgeist for over 80 years. In that time, like any company worth talking about, they've seen some astronomical heights and some deeply depressing lows. Some of these are well documented and often retold. After all, they are the company with the highest selling single issue of a comic of all time, with 1991's X-Men #1 selling over 8 million copies. On the other end of the spectrum, who could forget the time they declared bankruptcy only 5 years later? However, not everything in their history is as well known as these huge events. Marvel have so many skeletons in their closet, they've started to spill out into the room. It's very difficult to sweep a skeleton under the rug. Trust me on that one. I'm Zoe from What Culture, bringing you some of Marvel's worst kept secrets with 10 shocking cover-ups Marvel wants you to forget. Number 10. Jack Kirby created everything. When we think of people who shape Marvel, it's natural for Stan Lee to pop into our heads. Although he was an undeniable force in building the company's public image, he too often gets credit for actually creating their most famous superheroes. In truth, that credit should be aimed more towards a true unsung hero, Lee's collaborator Jack Kirby. You just need to look at their careers side by side. Jack Kirby created tons of characters both before and after working with Stan Lee, including the iconic Captain America. But Lee had never created a superhero until he worked with Kirby, and after they stopped collaborating, he never went on to create a truly memorable character again. Unless you count Stripperella, which you probably shouldn't. Kirby's fingerprints are even all over Spider-Man, one of the few Stan Lee characters he allegedly had no hand in creating at all. Kirby is now championed by other struggling comics creators, seen as something of a martyr for the comic community. When Mark Waid and Mike Wieringo made a Fantastic Four comic in which the team met God, they made sure to make the Almighty look and act exactly like Kirby. Image Comics, a company created by writers and artists who were sick of Marvel's work-for-hire contracts, originally planned to have Jack Kirby Presents at the start of all of their comics. This was in protest to Marvel writing Stan Lee Presents before each title, even if Lee had no involvement with said title. Number 9. The Spider-Man deal. Unless you've been living under a rock with no Wi-Fi, you'll no doubt be aware of the recent big scare that all Spider-Man fans had. Sony and Disney announced that their deal to share the movie rights to Spider-Man had fallen through, and that we wouldn't be seeing any more of Tom Holland's Peter Parker in the MCU. This was, of course, all patched up in a matter of weeks, with thanks to Holland himself making a drunken phone call to the powers that be and imploring them to think of the fans. It was very interesting to see how the public reacted to this news when it was first revealed. It seemed that everyone was siding with Disney and Marvel, claiming that Sony was simply being greedy by refusing to give a bigger slice of the movie profits. The truth is, however, that Marvel were already making much more money than Sony from Spider-Man, and really had no need for the larger share. While Sony gained the majority of profits from the films, Marvel still got 100% of money made from all Spider-Man merchandise. And while a movie would come along every 2 or 3 years and make a big splash, Spidey merch makes upwards of $1 billion every single year. While we were all rooting for Marvel, they were quietly profiting even more off the free publicity from the entire controversy. Number 8. Holding Hulk Hogan hostage. This all began when a wrestler going by the name of Terry Boulder appeared on a chat show with Lou Ferrigno, television's Incredible Hulk. When Terry realized that he was bigger and more muscular than the actor playing one of the strongest creatures on the planet, he decided to flex on him by incorporating it into his new wrestling name. And thus, Hulk Hogan was born. As this new Hulk gained popularity in the WWF, Marvel came looking for a slice of the action. As the owners of the Hulk trademark, they were able to reach an agreement. Marvel would own the rights to the Hulk Hogan name and would license it to the WWF for a fee. That's right. Anytime Hogan appeared in the ring, or anytime a Hulkamania bandana was sold, Marvel were getting a cut of the profit. Number 7. Welcome to Marville. As seen in the final pages of recent series, The History of the Marvel Universe, Marvel superheroes have always had one simple mission statement. With great power, there must always come great responsibility. If only those behind the scenes followed the same rules. Back in 2002, then president of Marvel, Bill Jemas, made a bet with writer Peter David that he could write a comic more popular than David's Captain Marvel reboot. Because apparently, even though he was the president of the entire company, Jemas still had time to write one of the weirdest, dullest, and most nonsensical comics ever made. The result was Marville, an attempt to satirize superheroes, and, oddly enough, the AOL Time Warner company. After a wholly unsuccessful 2 issues, Marville moved away from comedy and started to focus on the origin and meaning of life. After 6 issues that sold almost no issues, the series finally ended, with Jemas proudly announcing, "Marville has been a story that would never have been published if I didn't happen to have this here job as the president of Marvel." Jemas did not keep his job as president for much longer, and Marvel, as well as anyone who's read the thing, has been happily pretending that Marville never existed in the first place. Number 6. Adapting the Ancient One is a no-win scenario. When Marvel Studios decided to adapt Doctor Strange for the big screen, they ran into a bit of a problem. One of the most important characters in Strange's origin story is the Ancient One, a Tibetan monk and, honestly, a little bit of a stereotype. One of the film's writers, C. Robert Cargill, explained that trying to write this character into a Hollywood movie was Marvel's Kobayashi Maru, which is a purposely unwinnable training exercise from Star Trek. Aside from wanting to avoid writing any stereotypical caricatures, there was also the fact that one of Marvel Studios' largest markets is that of China, and it just so happens that a large amount of China refused to acknowledge Tibet as an independent region. Instead, they opted to cater towards neither China nor Tibet, and cast Tilda Swinton, catering towards fans of Wes Anderson movies, we guess? Number 5. Stan Lee is sued by Stan Lee. Although Stan Lee may not have been the genius superhero creator that many remember him as, there's no denying that he was a super savvy businessman who knew how to publicize and market the Marvel brand. With the rise of the internet in the late 90s, he applied this business know-how to found a startup company called Stan Lee Media, which would focus on creating new superhero media for the web. When the company began to lose money fast during the dot-com meltdown of the early 2000s, Lee himself decided to leave and focus on his new venture, POW Entertainment. You would think that the departure of Stan Lee himself would spell the end of Stan Lee Media, but the shareholders did not think the same way. As a company bearing the name Stan Lee, they decided that they must be partial owners of everything the real Stan Lee had created, and began to sue just about anyone they could in an attempt to cash in on that name. What followed was a series of ridiculous and frivolous lawsuits, spanning over 15 years, with Stan Lee Media going up against Marvel, Disney, and even Stan Lee himself. Number 4. Howard the Duck is a clone. Like Jack Kirby before him, Steve Gerber is no stranger to contract disputes with Marvel. When his satirical character Howard the Duck was unveiled in 1973, he was immediately scrutinized by Disney for bearing more than a striking resemblance to Donald Duck. This didn't stop him from becoming a huge hit with comic book fans though, leading to him actually being the title character in the first ever cinematic Marvel movie in 1986. However, when Gerber saw the amount of money that the company was making from his creation, he became dissatisfied with his standard work-for-hire contract. Even though he developed a smash hit, he was still only paid by the page and didn't own the rights to Howard. When they started to allow other writers to work on the character, Gerber became so frustrated that he quit Marvel altogether. He teamed up with Jack Kirby to create Destroyer Duck for Eclipse Comics. This Duck's main storyline involved him trying to save his friend, a duck known as the Little Guy, who had been held hostage and exploited by a thoughtless giant conglomeration called GodCorp. It was later revealed that Little Guy was actually a clone of the original Howard, named Leonard the Duck. Then, in a crossover with Savage Dragon, it was revealed that Leonard was actually the original Howard, and that the Howard in the Marvel Comics was the clone. It was essentially a very complicated but very effective middle finger to Gerber's former employers. Number 3. The Reign of the America Men. Rob Liefeld is no stranger to controversy within the comics community. As one of the rabble-rousing troublemakers who shook up the entire industry when he came up with the idea for Image Comics, he commands respect from all struggling creatives. However, he's also been involved in enough scandals and troubles that his name can send a shiver down the spine of those same creatives. When Liefeld, alongside Jeff Loeb, was commissioned to revamp Captain America for Marvel Comics, the results were terrible. Marvel cancelled the series, acting as if it had never happened. Liefeld and Loeb still had untold Captain America stories that they had been planning, so they decided to continue these stories with a different hero, Fighting American. Fighting American was a Cap clone created by Cap's actual creators, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. However, even this didn't work, as Kirby's widow Roz demanded too much money for Fighting American's rights. So Liefeld went ahead and created a clone of both Captain America and Fighting American, named Agent America. Now with 3 characters in comics who all looked and acted almost exactly the same, the ensuing legal shenanigans were messy, to say the least. Number 2. The CEO in the Shadows. Ike Perlmutter, the former CEO and current chairman of Marvel Entertainment, is a mysterious man. However, the hack that leaked Sony's emails a few years ago ended up revealing quite a lot about the shadowy figure. If there's one criticism that the Marvel Cinematic Universe used to often, and fairly receive, it was a lack of diversity in leading characters. Until Black Panther and Captain Marvel were given their own solo films, every protagonist the studio had ever produced was another white man. These 2 films went on to become 2 of the highest-grossing non-team-up movies in the series, proving that the audience was hungry for them. If Perlmutter hadn't been asked by Disney to step away from Marvel's film division, this would likely never have happened. Perlmutter simply believed that female superheroes weren't profitable, and wrote an email citing films like Elektra, Catwoman, and Supergirl as proof of his theory. He also had some choice words about non-white actors playing superheroes, allegedly stating that nobody would notice if they recast Terrence Howard's War Machine with Don Cheadle, as he said that all black people looked the same. It's no coincidence that movies like Captain Marvel, Black Panther, and Black Widow began development almost immediately after Perlmutter stood down. Number 1. Marvel superheroes are not legally human. The X-Men have historically had a rough time of it. Although they have the mutant gene in their DNA, for decades they've been trying to prove that they're still human beings and deserve to be treated with the same rights as everyone else. They've served as a metaphorical stand-in for countless minority groups who suffered the same discrimination. At the very least, their creators would never denounce their humanity, especially to make a quick buck. Right? Wrong. When Marvel went into business with Toy Biz in the early 90s, they collaborated on a line of X-Men action figures. However, because dolls were taxed higher than other toys, Marvel decided to exploit a legal loophole. The definition of a doll was a toy modeled on a human person, so Marvel simply declared that the X-Men weren't human people. Therefore, any model of an X-Man was not technically a doll, and they saved themselves a nice lump of cash and tax. Marvel went further, denouncing the humanity of their non-mutant heroes too. Eventually, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and all of his villains were considered legally not human. When word of this got out, both fans and comic creators themselves felt betrayed that Marvel would so easily dismiss the humanity of the characters they loved. Marvel attempted to calm this by claiming that they believed their heroes to be more than human, and ended up sounding kind of like a business-savvy Magneto. And that's our list. Got any goss you want to share? Let us know down in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I've been Zoe from Mock Culture, and you can find me on Twitter at Zemaskel, which is tragically involved in 0 scandals. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.